Coming up later, Smokey Robinson is with us tonight. Between 1961 and 69, this man wrote or co-wrote, and in many cases performed on and produced 43 songs that were somewhere in the top 40, and many of them were in the top 5. Now, I've got to go to the list because I'll leave something out. These are among Smokey Robinson's compositions. Shop Around, You Really Got a Hold on Me, Ooh Baby Baby, The Tracks of My Tears, I Second That Emotion, Tears of a Clown, Cruisin', Being With You, and for other people, My Guy by Mary Wells, Don't Mess with Bill by the Marvelettes, The Way You Do the Things You Do by the Temptations, Get Ready for the Temptations, of course the great My Girl, and Since I Lost My Baby, Ain't That Peculiar for Marvin Gaye. You should be on Mount Rushmore.
All right, man.
I was going through the research and came across a story about you guys, Smokey and the Miracles, being on the Ed Sullivan Show. Do you remember how Sullivan introduced you?
Yes, I do. Very, very well. I remember that because, you know, Ed was one of those people who always came to the show. You never saw Ed until the show started. And it was a live show. And like the show went on the air at, say, 7 o'clock. Ed got there at 6:58, okay? And he would come in and just whatever it was. And so he came out and he said, tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we have on our show Smokey, Smokey and the Little Smokies.
It was like a plate full of sausages, maybe. Little smoky links.
Exactly, exactly. He was beautiful, man. It was a 1 in a million character.
I read somewhere where you said you really don't write about your own life. You can write happy when you're sad. You can write sad when you're happy.
Yeah, I've been able to do that. I guess that a lot of songs that I've written have been personal ones, even if I didn't realize that they were at the time, you know. But I'm not a moody writer, you know. Like I have to get in a certain mood, and you know, if I've been heartbroken or something, I can go write a bunch of heartbreak songs or something like that. I've never been that way. I just write songs and I enjoy it.
What's the greatest quick inspiration that's ever come to you, where all of a sudden it came to you and literally within minutes the song came together in your head? Does it ever happen that way?
Yeah, that happens a lot of times. I guess the greatest example of that I would have that's sort of like an outstanding thing to me is my dad. When my dad was alive, my dad was a Cleveland sports fanatic. Okay, my dad, we lived in Detroit. My dad loved the Cleveland Indians, the Cleveland Browns, the Cavaliers. Whoever was from Cleveland, he loved them, okay? And I asked him why one time, and he said because when he was a young man, he settled in Cleveland before he came to Detroit. But when Cleveland Indians used to come and play the Detroit Tigers, if I was at home, I would take him to the game, because when I was a little guy, he would always take me to the game. He would even take me to Cleveland to go to the games, you know.
Yeah.
And so I would always take him. And if Cleveland was winning, then my dad was, I mean, he was all over me. Yeah, I told you my team was so-and-so and this and that and everything. So we're at the game this day, and about the 6th inning, it's like a sandlot baseball game because Detroit's ahead about 15-1 or something like that, you know. So I'm riding my dad, you know. He's sitting there, he's really quiet, he's huffing and puffing, you know. So I kind of like got disinterested in the game, and this melody came to me, and I started humming this melody. And so then these words start coming. So I couldn't find anything to write on, so I write on whatever I can get my hands on. So there was a popcorn box down on the floor of the stadium. So I picked it up and I ripped it apart so I could get to the part that's just plain cardboard without the advertisement on it. And I started to write this song, and there's a song, I don't know if you've ever heard this song, there's a song called I'll Try Something New. And it deals with this guy saying, I'll build you a castle with a tower so high it reaches the moon, and all these things like that. And it's one of these deep love stories and all like that. So that was at the baseball game. It was really spontaneous, you know.
A love song's pretty much where it's at for you. I mean, maybe that's why your stuff is universal and why it's pretty close to timeless. It doesn't sound dated. It's not pegged to a specific time. It's pegged to these universal feelings.
Well, you know, Bob, I think that's why I do choose to write about love most of the time, because of the fact that I feel exactly like that. See, when I'm writing, I want to think that I'm writing a song. I don't approach it whereas I'm trying to write a hit record at that time, or I'm trying to write what's going to be a hit now or something. I'm really trying to write a song that if I had written it 100 years before then, it would have been significant, and if it's around 100 years after that, it's going to be significant. So the subject matter that you can come up with to write about usually confines itself to love under those conditions, because of the fact that you could write something political or about a car or a dance or something like that, and before you could get it recorded, that may be passé, you know.
Yeah.
But love, I hope, is everlasting, and it's always around, and I want to be everlasting. I really do. I always tell people that I really would like to be like Beethoven, you know, and you know, long after I'm gone, they'll still be playing and singing my music.
Well, you know, now that you say that, there was a classic bit that I'm sure you saw on Saturday Night Live.
That was beautiful.
And Belushi's playing Beethoven. Yeah. I asked Paul Simon one time if the lyrics can stand alone as poetry. And he said, no, not really. He said, I think I've probably written some lines that are interesting to read sitting there by themselves, but they're given their meaning, and they're given the wind beneath their sails by the music itself. Separate from the music, the lyrics more or less just sit there. You feel that way too?
No, I don't. I don't feel like that about what I'm trying to write. I like to write songs. In fact, I feel quite the opposite. I like to write songs that you could read, and they would mean something whether you had music or not. If you just read them, they would actually mean something to you, and they would have the same in-depthness that they would have with music. And I think that when you start like that, then music is just an enhancer. And so I would like to have music that you can listen to without words, and words that make sense without music.
Berry Gordy Jr. was a collaborator of yours in the early days. What influence did he have on you at Motown?
Oh, he had, not only at Motown, on my life, because when I met Berry, Berry was already a professional songwriter. He was the guy who had written the hits that I knew by Jackie Wilson. And Jackie Wilson was one of my idols. So I had all of his records, man, and I would always look at the records to see who had written the songs, because I've always written songs all my life since I was in elementary school. And it just so happens that when I graduated from high school, I graduated from high school in June, and my buddies and I, who became the Miracles, we called ourselves the Matadors at that time, and the girl who became my wife, Claudette, was in our group, and we were going for an audition for Jackie Wilson's managers. And we went for this audition. And Berry happened to be there that day because he was going to turn in some new songs. In fact, the songs that he had with him became really popular, To Be Loved and Lonely Teardrops. Mm-hmm. And this was pre-Motown, you know. And so we sang about 4 or 5 songs that I had written, rather than singing some stuff that was currently popular by some artist or something, as people usually did when they went to auditions. And Jackie Wilson's managers say, hey, we can't use you because, you know, the platters are already out there. It's 4 guys with a girl, and you guys are amateurs, and blah, 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 and all this. You know, they gave us 1,000 reasons why we'd never make it. And Berry was just sitting there. And Berry at that time looked like he was probably about 18 or something, man. And he was just sitting there. And when we got through with the audition, we went outside. We were very disappointed. And Berry came out behind us, and he said, hey, man, where'd you guys get those songs from? So I said, I wrote them. So there were a couple of them that he had really liked. So he said, yeah. He said, you got any more songs? So I had a loose-leaf notebook full of songs, man. We go into this little office, and I'm showing him my songs. And he was very patient. And every song that I would show him, I could always rhyme things good, you know. I could always make rhymes. And my songs were rhymed up good, but the majority of them didn't make sense, because the first verse would be saying, in rhyme, it would be rhymed good, but I'd be saying, like, boy, I love you, and it's good that you're here with me, and holding you is the greatest thing I can think of that I'm doing at this particular time, and so on.
Well, that is a good lyric.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Then the second verse would say something like, but it would be rhymed up. It would say, oh, my darling, when are you coming back? Because I haven't seen you in 10 years, and I'm longing to hold you, and these things like that, you know. So he told me, he said, man, he said, you know, you rhyme good. He said, but your songs don't make sense. He said, because a song should be something that has a beginning, a middle, and an ending that tie in together, that tell a story, that tell a short story. It's like a short book or a short movie or something, and it gives people a complete idea of what you're talking about. So from that day on, that's what I've tried to do. I've tried to write songs, and he was the greatest influence on me on writing songs in my entire life.
One of your first big hits, if not the first, then one of the early ones, was Shop Around. Didn't he have some role in really helping you to craft that and getting it to the point where it would be a hit?
Absolutely. He used to do that with the earlier songs that I had written. I had actually written Shop Around. We had a young man at the time named Barrett Strong at Motown. And Barrett Strong had a big smash hit record with a song that Barry had written called I Need Some Money. You know, the best things in life are free. I know you know that song.
Yeah.
Okay. So we were in the process of doing an album on Barrett. And so Barry said, I want you to do some songs for Barrett's album. I said, okay, fine. One of the songs was Shop Around. So I was really excited about Shop Around because it was one of those songs that just flowed out in about half an hour. I had this song. So I ran to the studio and I said, Barry, I got this song for Barrett. I want you to hear this. So he came down to the piano and I started to play it and I was singing it to him. And he said, wait a minute, man. He said, I want to change this chord here. And he started changing some chords around and everything. And in the process of us sitting there doing that, he said, I like the way you sound on this song. I want you to record this song. I said, no, man, I wrote this song for Barrett. You know, it's a hit behind money. He said, I don't care about that, man. He said, I want you to sing this song. I like your voice on this song. So I want you to sing this song. So I went in the studio. I recorded the song on the Miracles in Me. And he put the record out. And the record had been out for about 2 weeks. At 3 o'clock in the morning, one morning, I get this phone call, and I had been sick. I had the flu, and I was just recovering from it. And I just got married and all that. And 3 o'clock in the morning, my phone rings. I answer the phone. I say, hello. He said, Smoke, it's Barry, man. What's happening? I said, what's happening? That's what I want to know. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. What's happening? He said, I want you to get up right now, man, and come to the studio. And call the group, and I want them to come to the studio. He said, you and Claudette get up and come over here now. I said, what, man? He said, yeah. He says, I said, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. He said, I don't care what time it is. He said, Shop Around is haunting me. He said, I can't get it out of my mind. He said, the record that you did on it is okay. He said, but I'm going to change the arrangement on it. He said, it's going to be a #1 record. He said, I can't sleep. So if I can't sleep, I want you to get up and come over here now. I've already called the musicians, and I want you to come now. So thinking that the guy was totally out of his mind, I got up, got Claudette up, called the other guys and said, and they thought I was crazy. We met at the studio. Everybody showed up with the exception of the piano player. So Barry played the piano himself, and we recorded Shop Around, and it was #1.
You played at the Apollo.
Man, the first time we played at the Apollo was 1959, I think it was. And we were on the show with Ray Charles. And it was one of the most hair-raising experiences I've ever had in my life because I was frightened to death, man. All I'd heard about the Apollo was the legacy of it and that, you know, when they had the amateur shows, they would throw things at people or pull you off the stage with a hook or whatever it was. And I was frightened to death to be playing at the Apollo. And my first time at the Apollo, I don't ever remember seeing one person. I knew the back wall. I knew every crack and crevice in the back wall that there was because all I did was look straight out at the back wall.
Too terrified to make eye contact.
Too terrified to look at anybody in the audience. I didn't even know if there was an audience there. You know, I knew the back wall like a puzzle or something, man, like a map. But I was terrified.
Was Ray Charles supportive?
Ray Charles was wonderful, man, because when we first got there, we didn't even have any arrangements. We were going to sing 2 songs. And so we got there the morning of the show. It opened on a Wednesday. And you would have rehearsal with the Apollo band that morning. We get there that morning, and just so happens that this week, since Ray Charles is the headliner there, his band's going to play, not the regular Apollo band. But we get there, and we don't have any arrangements. So the guy this guy really turned out to be a guy that I really love too, Honey Cole, And Honey Coles, he was
he was a tap dancer, wasn't he?
He was a tap
Coles?
dancer. He had a partner named Charlie Atkins, and Charlie Atkins became, after we started a school for our artists at Motown called Artist Development, Charlie Atkins was the in-house choreographer for Motown. And so they had this duo, this dance thing, Coles and Atkins. So Honey happened to be the manager of the Apollo, and he was in charge of all the shows and what have you. Honey was raising hell, man. He was upset because we didn't have arrangements. All we had was these little chord sheets. And the band was sitting there and said, well, we can't play this, man. You know, we need regular arrangements and all. And they were going through all these changes on us. And Honey was raising hell. And so finally the door opened, man. And in comes Ray. And Ray hears what's going on. He said, what's going on here? So Honey was saying, well, these kids come in from Detroit. I don't know what they think about it. Come in, they don't have arrangements and all. And the band said, we can't play this stuff they got. They don't even have notes on it and all that. So Ray said, he said, well, any of you kids know the songs? So we had out this record, Bad Girl, at the time, and we were singing another song that was done by another group that was popular at that time. So I said, I know it. It was Ray Charles, man. I was speechless because it was Ray Charles, you know. So Ray said, okay, he said, come over to the piano with me. So I went over to the piano, and I played our record down one time. My hands were shaking, my voice was shaking. And I played it down one time, and Ray said, okay, move over. I said, okay. So he started to play it, and it sounded like Chopin or somebody was playing it, man. And he said, you sing it while I play it. And I was singing, and he was playing it. And while I was singing and he was playing, he said, saxophones, I want you to write down this. Boo-ba-ba-boo-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba, write that down. Play that right there. They were writing it down. Ba-ba-ba-beep, and you know, so, and he, trombones, I want you to do so-and-so. And he did a complete arrangement on our songs, sitting right there at the piano that morning. And I love Ray, man. I love Ray Charles, man. He's one of my favorite people because, you know, he was Ray Charles, and we were just, I mean, we weren't even known. We were just some kids, man. We had one record out. And once again, you know, like Barry, you know, Ray didn't have to do that, man, but he did. And it was a wonderful introduction to show business for me. And it made me see that even though you are in show business and you're someone that people may recognize, you're still a person, and you should conduct yourself as such and be a person at all times.
Well, it's been a few years since Smokey Robinson had his last album out. This one is called Double Good Everything. We'll talk more about that and about some of the history of Motown and the classic hits written and performed by Smokey Robinson if you join us here tomorrow night. Thanks. See you later. Thanks for staying up later. We're back with Night 2 with Smokey Robinson. We covered a lot of ground last night, talked about many of the classic hits. His new one is called Double Good Everything, and it is a Smokey Robinson album. If you like the stuff from the 60s and the 70s, you're going to like this stuff, too. We were talking last night about the classic days of Motown, and you mentioned that Motown had its own in-house choreographer, but it even went beyond that. This was a very sophisticated operation.
Absolutely. You know, it's once again, to me, it's like a tribute to Barry because he had so many wonderful ideas. When I think about all the crap and stuff that gets written about him, it just really...
Barry Gordy Jr.
Yeah, it really grieves me sometimes because of the fact that I recognize the fact that he did something that politicians have been trying to do forever, and ministers and all sorts of people who are in that political or religious realm have been trying to do. Which is to unite people, not only races, but worldwide through one source. And he did it with music. And it was incredible because in the early days, man, when we first started Motown, we would get letters from the white kids in the Detroit area and the surrounding areas and what have you. And they would write stuff like, you know, we have your records, but our parents don't know it because if our parents knew it, they would make us throw them out and different things like that. And eventually it became a thing whereas the music that was made at Motown bridged a racial gap, you know, and brought people together. And it was very obvious when we went places like to play in the South, whereas in the beginning, you know, like we'd be on a stage which would be in the center of the floor, and black people would be on one side, White people be on the other side, or black people be upstairs, white people be downstairs, or vice versa. And that music, man, brought everybody together to the point where you go places and they be dancing together and what have you. And worldwide, because I can go places right now. I'll go somewhere and I'll go to Spain. And after the show, we'll go out to one of the night spots or something like that, and there'll be a band there, and they'll be singing, and they'll be playing, and they'll, if you feel that you can't go on because all your... This guy singing verbatim. You know, if you don't look or something like that, you might think it was Levi, okay? The guy comes off stage, and you say, hey, man, that was great. Guy says, no comprende. Okay? It's a wonderful thing. And it's because of him that these things were done, man. And he started this school, artist development, for the acts because he wanted us to be entertainers. He didn't just want us to have records and go out and not be good representatives of what the music was about. So we had this school, whereas we went and we learned. It was like mandatory. It wasn't like you could go and sign with Motown and you didn't have to really go to artist development if you didn't want to. You had to go. You had to go. When you were at home, you had to go to school. Even the seasoned acts. When we were at home, we had to go to school a couple of days a week. We'd go and we would learn harmonies. We would learn choreography. We would learn presence. We would learn all sorts of things. The girls would learn grace and put books on their head and walk and hygiene. It was incredible. It was an incredible place to be. And it was all his dream, man.
Let me throw out names of classic Smokey Robinson compositions and see if there's some quick thought that brings to mind.
Okay.
The Tracks of My Tears.
Marv Tarplin.
Who's Marv?
Marv Tarplin is my guitarist. Marv Tarplin has been with the Miracles. He started with the Miracles and me in 1961, and he and I are still together right today. And Marv Tarplin is where the Tracks of My Tears started from, as well as a lot of those songs that you named on that list that you read off yesterday. He had the music, which he does. He just does the music, and he puts this music on tape, and he brings it to me. He says, hey, man, what do you think about this? And if I hear something on it, I'll say, well, I like this, and so on and so forth, and I'll start to work on it. And that's what happened with the Tracks of My Tears. Tracks of My Tears was one of those songs that he had this wonderful music to. And the first part of that song, or the first part of the chorus, is what came to me first. Take a good look at my face, you see my smile looks out of place. If you look closer, it's easy to trace. And I couldn't figure out what to trace for about a week, man. And then one day I thought about the Tracks of My Tears. Because when I'm writing a song, there are no new words. There's no new music. There's no new notes. And so I always try to approach it, I want to say this differently with the same words than anyone has ever said this. So no one had ever said that. And to think of somebody crying so much until, if you look closely at them, you can see tracks of their tears. So that's where they came from.
You Really Got a Hold on Me, which was covered by the Beatles. The Beatles loved that one.
Yeah. You Really Got a Hold on Me makes me think of New York. Because I had come to New York to do a business trip. I was a vice president at Motown, so I had come to New York actually to do a business trip. And I had come to meet some publishers here. And at the time, Sam Cooke had out a song called Bring It On Home to Me. Mm-hmm. And it had this funky blues kind of drag feeling to it. And I wanted to write something like that. So one day after one of the meetings, I was sitting in my hotel room, and I was here by myself, and I was sitting in my hotel room, and I started to write this song, You Really Got a Hold on Me. And the first thing that came to me is, I don't like you, but I love you. Seems like I'm always thinking of you. Though you treat me badly, I love you madly. And that's where it came from.
My favorite lyric of yours is, maybe you want to give me kisses sweet, but only for one night with no repeat. And maybe you'll go away and never call. And a taste of honey's worse than none at all.
Why,
From
Bob?
I second that emotion. I have my reasons, Smokey. What comes to your mind, since I'm not being interviewed here, what comes to your mind when you hear I second that emotion?
Al Cleveland. Al Cleveland is the guy that I wrote that song with. And the reason he comes to my mind is because I Second That Emotion was a slip of the tongue. He and I were Christmas shopping one year, and we were buying some things for our wives at this counter, and the young lady was waiting on us, and she said something, and you know how you usually say, I second the motion?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, yeah, I second that emotion. And we laughed because he said that. And then after we walked away, we said, wow, what a great title for a song. And that was where the song came from.
Tears of a Clown. Now, you don't expect on a record you're going to hear on the top 40 station to have a line like, just like Pagliacci did, I try to keep my sadness in. I mean, that isn't your typical stuff.
Tears of a Clown makes me think of Stevie Wonder. See, I got all these guys when you ask me. Stevie Wonder had that track. He had done this music. And he came to me, and in those days we did a lot of collaborating at Motown. And he came to me and he said, Smoke, I got this track, man, and I love this music. He said, but I can't think of a song to go with it, and I want you to see what you can come up with. So I said, okay. I didn't listen to the track at that moment. I took it home with me, and that evening I put the tape on, and there's this little calliope thing on there. Bum, 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 ba-da-yum, bum, 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 straight from the circus. So when I heard that, I said, well, this song has got to be about the circus. And I wanted to think of what can I write about the circus that would be meaningful to people. And the most meaningful story that I ever heard about the circus was Pagliacci, who was the clown who made everybody else laugh and made everybody else happy. But when he was alone, he was sad and he was heartbroken because he had nobody to love him.
Songs for the Temptations, but there are significant differences because some, for example, Eddie Kendricks would be the lead singer.
Yeah.
Others, David Ruffin was the lead singer. There's a big difference between My Girl and, let's say, The Way You Do the Things You Do.
Yeah, The Way You Do the Things You Do was a song that I started to write on the road. Once again, I was on tour with the Miracles, and I've been trying to get a hit on the Temptations. I'd had a couple of records out on them, and they weren't really hits. And so when I thought about this particular song, I just loved it for them, and I heard the high voice singing it. So I recorded that on Eddie. However, I knew that David Ruffin was a sleeping giant in this group, because after I had done The Way You Do the Things You Do on the Temptations, everybody started to record the Temptations and use Eddie Kendricks' voice for all the records. But I knew that if I could get the right song for David Ruffin's voice, he was a sleeping giant. And so finally, we came up with My Girl. Ron White, who was one of the Miracles, and I were writing some songs once again for an album for the Temptations. And My Girl happened to be one of the songs. And My Girl, we kind of nurtured that song along because the Temptations and us were on the show together at the Apollo Theater. And between all the shows, we'd go down to the piano on stage, and I would rehearse them on the song. And they made up the background themselves. I used to always let the Temptations make up their own backgrounds because they were awesome at it, you know, and they would get to blow in that harmony and stuff like that.
Ain't That Peculiar, Marvin Gaye.
Marv Tarplin.
Again.
Started that one too, yeah, yeah. And Marvin Gaye, man, you know, I miss Marvin so much. I loved him very much. I hate how his life ended up. But he was one of my favorite artists to work with ever, because Marvin was the kind of person, man, you'd write your song and you'd go in the studio, and Marvin was usually late for the session, you know. But I didn't mind, because Marvin would come running in there, man, and he would say, okay, Smoke, how's the song go, man? I would show him how the song would. And Marvin would proceed to sing your song like he had written it himself, like he knew it before he got there. And he would Marvin Gaye it, man. And it was just wonderful.
A lot of people say that if you made a list of the top 10 records of the pop rock era, whatever category we're going to slip these things into, if you made a list of the top 10 albums, you couldn't leave What's Going On off of it from the early 70s, Marvin Gaye.
No, you couldn't. Marvin was a very spiritual man. He had grown up in a religious family, basically, you know, and he was a very spiritual man. And I know that when you read about the public side of his life, you don't even realize that, but Marvin was constantly talking about the spiritual side of his life. And when he started to do What's Going On, which to me is my favorite album of all times. I mean, there's been no album before that time or since that time that has taken the place of that album for me, personally. It is my favorite album of all times. What's Going On is more significant today than it was when he did it, okay? If you just sit down and play it and listen to what it's saying, it has more significance today than it did then, okay? When Marvin was doing this album, I went by his house one day and he was working on it. He said, Smoke, he said, I'm doing this album. He said, but actually, he played a couple of the first songs for me. And I said, man, those songs are great. You know, he said, yeah, he said, God is doing this album. I said, God's doing this album? He said, yeah, man. He said, God is doing this entire album. He said, because I have no control over what's coming out. He said, it's just happening. He said, and it's a message. And it's going to be a message that will last for all times.
Marvin Gaye obviously was a very sensual performer. Did an album called Sexual Healing.
Yeah.
I've heard Aretha say that there wasn't a woman who was in the presence of Sam Cooke that wasn't moved at some level by Sam Cooke. But then I've heard other people say, yeah, it's all true. But the man, if you had to pick one, in terms of stage presence and an ability to move in an instinctive way, move that audience, Otis Redding was the guy.
Otis was a close friend, and I loved him very much, but I would not say that. I think for me it would have to be Jackie Wilson.
Really?
He was the most electrifying performer that I think I've ever seen. I mean, he was just incredible. I mean, from first note to exit, it was total energy. If he was singing a ballad, up-tempo, whatever he was doing, total energy. He was the first solo artist that did dance routines for himself. You know, like Michael does now. Jackie was the first one who started that kind of stuff. Sam was awesome. Sam was also one of my idols. And Sam could just stand there and sing you to death, okay? But Jackie was visual, and also he could sing you to death.
Since you mentioned Michael Jackson, the first time you heard the Jackson 5, what'd you think? What'd you think their possibilities were?
I just thought they were just awesome. I mean, it was phenomenal to me to see a little guy like Michael Jackson have that much, whatever it would take, that much age on his soul to be able to interpret a song like he could at that age. I mean, it was like, here's this old soul in this little body, you know? Because I have a song that I'd written called Who's Loving You? And Who's Loving You is about a guy telling his woman, when he had her here, he loved her, and now she's gone, and he wonders who's loving her because he's hurt by this, you know? Michael Jackson recorded this song when he was 10 years old, okay? And he has one of the most dynamic versions of it that I've ever heard on that particular song, or heard anybody sing the blues, because it's a bluesy song. Now, how could a 10-year-old guy know how to sing Who's Loving You like that, you know?
Let's shift gears here. You've written the music for an upcoming Broadway play about the Harlem Globetrotters, right?
Yeah, man. Hoops is a project that was brought to me by my personal manager, Mike Roshkin, who he has the utmost faith in me. He feels like I can do whatever, but it's a mutual feeling. I feel the same way about him. And it's about Abe Saperstein and the Harlem Globetrotters. And before getting off on this project, I'm a basketball fanatic. I'm a sports fanatic. That's why I know you so well, man. Because I'm a sports fanatic, and basketball is one of my favorite things. And I've been watching the Globetrotters since I was probably 6 years old. So Mike comes to me and he's got the script. He said, somebody sent me the script and they wanted you to do the music if you were interested. And I think you should, because it's something that you'd like. And I've so far written 22 pieces of music for it. And it's one of the most exciting things in my life. We've started to cast it, and we're going into workshop in a couple of weeks. And I just can't wait to even see the people singing and dancing and doing the music in the rehearsals, man.
When do you think it'll hit Broadway?
I don't know, but I know that we're planning on trying to get it into what we call regional theater before you go to Broadway by mid-next year.
It's double good everything. And let me tell you, in the last 24 hours around the office before you came in and back in the dressing rooms, we had the cassette players. We were listening to all your classic hits. The whole staff here got such a kick out of this. We were looking forward to it, and you really paid off for us.
Thank you very much, man.
Thanks a lot.
Appreciate it.
Smokey Robinson. See you later.